Good afternoon, everyone. It's 4 o'clock. It's Friday. If you've got nothing better to do, you might be here with us. I suspect there may be a few people in the pub already. I suspect a few people may well be going home to hide. These are interesting times we live in, I think it's fair to say. I want to remind people of a couple of things. My name's James Sims. I'm the director of the EverLearner. I'm a teacher of 20 years experience. I've got Marta with me. I don't know if Marta's going to put herself on the camera over here. I'm going to waggle the camera. There's Marta over there behind the light. She's on control. There's her little control desk over there. We're going to take you through. Whoops, messed that up. I'm going to take you through the session this afternoon, and we reckon it's going to be about 35 to 40 minutes time, something like that. Okay, so do stay with us. We've got some interesting things towards the end of the session as well, which hopefully will be really relevant for you. This is the second of 4 sessions that we're going to be putting on. This one is specifically related to using webinars. Now, obviously, I'm going to go through the details of what webinars are, some of the considerations you should make if you're teaching. And I think it's fair to say that a core assumption here is the sort of assumption of the possibility of the need for remote teaching and learning in the coming days and weeks. We don't know if that's going to happen. Maybe it won't, but we think you probably should be prepared for it because there's a real possibility that it may well indeed happen. So we're going to focus on webinars today. Now, I also want to remind colleagues and viewers that in our first session of 4, where we looked at remote teaching, how do you do that, we made a conclusion. And that conclusion was that the best model we could use for remote teaching and learning was the right learning management system combined with the right live episodes, possibly through a webinar. So obviously the live episodes through the webinar is what we're going to talk about here. Marta, could you please point people in the direction of the infographic? There's a great infographic for everyone to have a look at. It's in the description of the YouTube channel just down there. And while I'm pointing down to that description and while I'm encouraging you to have a look at that infographic, which Marta may well have on the screen at the moment, can I also ask everybody that attends this live show, please subscribe to the YouTube channel. Obviously, it's completely free. It just lets you know when we upload things or when we go live. And secondly, please do hit like on the stream as well. It makes a massive difference for us. These things really, genuinely encourage us to put out more content, and it makes it more and more relevant for us because it's an indicator for us that we're reaching our audience, and it also puts us higher in the rankings for YouTube, so our stream gets sort of a bit more attention. So please do that. Don't be shy or reluctant to do so, because it makes a genuine impact on us being able to put this material out to you. So the infographic is there. It's a summary of what we're going to talk about now, but I'm going to take you through it. There is a lot of webinar software available to you, and we're going to pick a handful of alternatives that you could consider, and we're going to show you those within the show. So, Marta, unless I've forgotten something, which I may do, I have forgotten something, we are going to change between microphones here, so you might just need to adjust your levels as we change between microphones, as we change the shot. So just be aware of that. Otherwise, unless, Marta, you tell me we're missing anything, I think we're ready to go. Get cracking. So I'm ready to go, and you are.
Okay, let's go.
Okay.
Then.
So let's see if we can have a focus here on webinars. And I guess the first thing we really need to do, I mean, we've looked at our team before. This is who we are. We're trying really hard at the moment because people, I think, are kind of needing this information. So anyway, I won't go too much into this. And here's us in our studio. Anyway, you get the idea. The first thing we want to ask ourselves is, what is a webinar? I know it's kind of fundamental. Some of us will know this already. But look, we consider it to be the following. A live presentation. It's over the internet. And it allows for audience participation through Q&A and polls. Notice that it's not saying here through cameras and through microphones. That's really one of the differentiators here. A webinar is much more presentational, where specialist equipment and things like speech and video are really from one to many. Okay. Now, of course, if we differentiate that between that and web conferencing, look what we've got here. Web conferencing is a video call with lots of different people, and they can engage in two-way conversation. And we're arguing webinar technology is transmitting and sharing presentations, and it's from the host that needs the specialist equipment, whereas in the video call, everyone needs that specialist equipment. But in the webinar, the participants, or the audience, maybe we should call it that way, they can interact, but it's typically not through video and through audio unless they're invited in, often as to what's called a panelist. So it's really a presenter and an audience, and it works that way. So we want to differentiate those things. Of course, things like, web conference would be things like Skype, Hangouts, this kind of thing. We are talking about webinar specific technology. That's what we're talking about here. So let's move things forward. There are a million well, no, not literally, but there are many, many, many different webinar solutions. We are not wedded to any of them in particular. We have chosen today to talk about these because we think these are amongst those that most people will address. They're also well featured in the main, and they are, it's quite likely that you're going to choose something like this or something similar to this. There are others out there, and we are by no means ruling out any others, but these are the ones that we chose to look at, not least because we can't look at everything within a 45-minute session. So these, we're going to look at Zoom, we're going to look at Adobe, we're going to look at Zoho, we're going to look at Webinar Ninja and Webinar Jam. The only thing I'd add here is Webinar Jam and EverWebinar are the same company. You might notice from the logos there, and I'll differentiate what these two things are for you in a few moments' time when we get to that. Okay, so we've got what we call a wish list. We're really interested, in my opinion, in these factors. Now, I want to be clear here. Webinars and the technology that's behind them, the services that are provided on the market, they are primarily targeted at B2B, business to business sales. So they're targeted at corporates, they're targeted at organizations with remote working teams, they're targeted businesses that use video calls for marketing, for online meetings, for meeting new clients, for product demonstrations, this kind of thing. So a lot of the features within webinars are targeted towards that. And the question we're trying to ask ourselves here is, how can we use that in an educational format? Can we take something like screen sharing, for example, the management options, for example, recording function as an example, and can we utilize those so that those features have an educational purpose? And we think here we've got nine things that we believe that are 9 or 8. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 functions. Sorry guys, we've got 8 functions that we believe are really important. So we've got real-time interactions. We'll come back to those in detail. We've got management options. They're really important when working with children. We've got screen sharing functionality. Of course, that's pretty important when you're going to be showing a presentation, or you're going to have a blackboard on your screen or something like that. You can record what it is that you present. We want full analytics package so that you know how students engage with the session at their end. We want it to be scalable so you can get potentially one teacher to hundreds of students in one go. We want integration of reminders and follow-up emails that make life easier for us in managing our students. And we want it to be app and web-based ideally. Okay, so these are the factors that we are arguing are probably going to be most important to you. Okay, so we'll go back into the studio for a moment and we'll discuss those things before taking this further.
You're in.
So there we go. Have we got sound up?
Yes,
yep,
we
good.
did. Yes.
So there we go. So look, just by way of an introduction, really. I mean, we just want to really get a feel for this at this point. I think that wish list is important. I want to sort of reiterate that point that webinars are designed for typically sort of corporate or business environments. I mean, yes, there are educational features to them, but I think webinars are not right now particularly commonly used for education of children. Education in adult training sort of environments, yes, but used with children to replace classrooms, much less so. Now, there are examples. There's numerous online schools, for example, that use this, and it can be done, but the feature set is one that we ultimately need to apply. Any questions, Marta?
No, just if you could help us clarify in our minds what is the difference between a webinar and a live call.
Yeah.
I think it's important to differentiate between the two. I think it's important to be clear on
that. A live call like a Skype call or a Hangout or something like that, or even a Zoom call, not a Zoom webinar, they are ultimately a two-way conversation. It's two or more people meeting in a video conference environment, engaging in a dialogue. A webinar is only one directional, monodirectional, in the sense that the presenter is presenting their presentation to an audience who they can bring into the conversation if they want to or if they need to. But that is the primary difference. I'd also say that with webinars, you've got much more control, which we'll go over in a second, and there's also much better analytics or tracking of involvement, which we'll go over in a minute as well. So I think those things are particularly important. Don't neglect the practical aspects of this. A video call, a Skype, a Hangout, it requires both the presenter and the recipient, the audience, needing specialist equipment like a microphone, like a camera. Yes, of course, I know many of us are carrying those around in our pockets, but it's a layer of requirement that we don't necessarily want. The webinar only requires the presenter to have that. And I think it's really important to stress that point. So it should be prone to fewer technical challenges, because the only technical requirement is for the presenter. The recipient simply needs a connection. That's a connection in a browser or an app, or could be one or the other. And that's pretty much it. So that makes it much more direct, much easier to set up. The other thing you might just want to be aware of is that, generally speaking, webinars are premium and live calls are not, are freemium or free. So you just want to bear that in mind as well. We are talking ultimately about premium services here.
But it's probably also worth mentioning the fact that webinars give you, as a teacher or as a presenter, give you a much higher level of control over what participants can and can't do.
Yeah.
Very often you won't be able to see the participants, for example. You will know they're there. You will know their activity, but you won't be able to see them, which in the case of when we're talking, when we're dealing with children from home, it might actually be a very, very positive thing compared to a live call.
Yeah.
So I think there are different levels and different features of a webinar that are very adequate for when we are talking about dealing with children.
Well, these are some of the subtleties, right? I mean, we've got to be careful with something like a video call. Do we want child in class, child from our class A to be able to see the background video environment of child B and vice versa? Quite possibly not. There are probably some issues around that. So the fact that the webinar gives us that layer of control, that the only video stream is coming from the presenter, is quite positive. The other thing, in some of the services as well, of course, you can manage what the background, you can use sort of like digital virtual backgrounds, this sort of thing. I mean, it's a more technical side of this, but it's available as well. I mean, I'm wondering how many teachers will want to show their home environment to their students on the other end. It's a subtle point, but it's one that people need to consider, because, I don't know if I'd want my students from my school seeing my office at home, or my dining room, or my living room, or whatever it is. It's kind of getting a bit close, isn't it?
Or even better, you can actually be on the beach in the Bahamas and just say that it's a virtual background.
That you could do as well. Yeah, you could
just
say you're on you're on a beach as a virtual background and actually be there. That would be the
exactly.
thing. Okay, I'm ready to go in section 2 when you're ready, Marta.
Yep. Okay, let's go then.
So this is where we left things off earlier on as I was presenting. I'm going to focus initially on real-time interactions, and this is one of the features that I think teachers will expect to use and will value using. So it's one that it's important we spend a bit of time on. First of all, what are we talking about with real-time interactions? Well, let me just take you through them. We're talking about the capacity for there to be Q&A. I mean, this is no different to a physical classroom, right? It's quite likely that in the times that you're presenting from your whiteboard or your PowerPoint or whatever, it's quite likely that there's going to be Q&A integrated in that. And you will see that all of our services do that easily. Okay, so Q&A built in. What I do want to differentiate here though, is the difference between Q&A and chat. Okay, chat is a general rhythm of conversation that's happening alongside the webinar. It's the kind of thing where people will come into a webinar, they'll go, hey, I'm here. Hey, good day, everyone. How are you doing? Everyone sees chat. Q&A is direct between the webinar organizer, the person managing it, and an individual. Okay, so this is a Q&A. It's hidden. Now, obviously, it doesn't necessarily directly relate to what Q&A is in the classroom, because it wouldn't be hidden, right? We'd ask a question, we'd ask it to the person in the third row, we'd get their answer, and everyone would hear it. But in this format, Q&A is the environment where people are probably going to raise things if they're stuck, or if something's not working, or if they need help with something. It's probably going to go in here. Chat is going to be more of a general conversation for all people to see. Now, you can see that all the services have both. Now, polls are different. A poll, typically, you will prepare the poll in advance. So let's say you're going to be teaching, about Newton's laws, and you decided that after a particular slide you want to ask a question and all students respond to that question. That's what a poll would do, because you would prepare the question in advance, you'd click for the poll to appear, and it would be what is the correct definition of Newton's first law, and you'd have 3 different choices and the students would have to choose one. Okay, or whatever. It's not a very good question, but you get the idea. That's a poll. Now, of course, it suggests that it's going to be asking about people's opinions, but it's equally can just be asking, can you answer a question? So that's what a poll is. Chat, we've mentioned. Hands up, this is where a student can raise a hand, and if they raise a hand, they're waiting for you as the webinar sort of manager to come to them and ask them what the problem is. Okay, so it's kind of a useful feature. It's one touch lighter than the Q&A, but hands up, you'll notice that some of our services don't offer a hands up service, but if something's wrong, they can offer a hands up. Now, for example, you could have said to them, I want everyone to ask me a question via Q&A. And a hand up might mean, I don't know where the Q&A is. Okay, so that would be an example. Surveys, again, surveys are different from polls. It sounds like polls are surveys, right? Asking opinions. Surveys are different in webinars. Surveys are things that students do after the webinar ends. Okay, so it's effectively a redirect that we're talking about here, a redirect. So you do your 45-minute webinar, you teach all your kids, you've done some Q&A, you've done some chat, you've done some polls, whatever. After that, the student will be redirected to a survey and they can answer maybe opinions about the webinar, or it could be that you've got a past paper exam question on the survey, or you ask them to do some writing. That's what a survey does. And you can see everything but Webinar Ninja does that. Breakout rooms. This is quite specialised functionality. I have it on the services I use, but I'm going to be honest with you, I don't use it a great deal. This is for group work. So let's say you've got 20 students in a webinar, and you decided to create 4 different groups. Breakout rooms would randomly, or you can designate people if you want to, place them into 4 groups of 5 students in a different call to one another, and maybe one person is presenting, or maybe you bring people in for a discussion, that sort of thing. And allowed to talk, this means that the webinar manager can choose, and you see with breakout rooms, that's only Adobe Connect and Zoom that offer that, okay? Now, allowed to talk, what this means is if you've got a student or a participant you want to bring in to be part of the conversation, you can do that here. So scores, we believe Adobe Connect and Zoom are the best when it comes to real-time interactions, okay? So bear that in mind. Let's go to management options. Much more mixed bag here, folks, okay? So encryption is absolutely essential here. So by encryption, we obviously referring to here the data security of people who are coming to the webinar, and that information isn't going to be extracted or shared easily. You see our top 3 there. We're unsure with Webinar Ninja, Webinar Jam, because they don't publicize that specifically, but certainly with our top 3, Zoho, Zoom, and Adobe, you're going to get encryption. Password protection. This is where you can put a password so that your students enter a password to enter the webinar. You've got this in Adobe Connect, Zoom, and Webinar Jam. Now, I would say about passwords, just remember people can forget them. So just bear that in mind. Control over contributors, all providers provide that. So whether someone's an audience member or a panelist, then that's important. Are the attendees hidden to one another? Okay, yes in Adobe, yes in Zoom, yes in Webinar Ninja. Now what that would mean is that if I was to go to a webinar as an attendee and there were 99 other people in the webinar, I wouldn't be able to see their names. And that is the case for everybody apart from Zoho and Webinar Jam. It's not clear. Now, this is where things get interesting, is why we included EverWebinar. An automated or evergreen webinar, is it possible? Now, just to be clear what an evergreen webinar is, it's a webinar, but the stream is recorded in advance. So it goes out at a set time, it feels like a webinar, there's chat functionality, all this stuff. Only Webinar Jam offers that. So if you wanted to pre-record your material and have it go out as a stream, then you need to think about Webinar Jam in that context. Now, why would you do that? Well, you might want to quality assure, prepare the information in advance. You might be only one person and you're worried about thinking, well, how do I both manage the chat and the Q&A and present? That could be reasons. And transcript function. We thought this might be interesting on the transcript function. What this would mean is that when you're presenting, it automatically produces your speech in a written format. This could be people who are experiencing problems with hearing or ascend, students of different kinds. Now, we're saying that nobody does this. What I would say is that Zoom does do it, but it only becomes available once it's been recorded. Okay, so just be aware of that. It's based on the recording, so that's the one. Now, again, we see Adobe Connect strong, we see Zoom strong, we see the others falling behind. You see Zoho here is falling behind quite a bit at this point by the feature set that we're looking at. Let's look at screen sharing functionality. I mean, basically they all do it. But you'll notice here, this is our webinar environment. You see here, share screen. You can open a specific window, an application, a PowerPoint slide, a web page, a document, whatever it happens to be, and you can do that. So they all do that. Which of them record? Okay, so we've got here, webinars can be recorded and then uploaded to platforms such as YouTube. So this is about getting the fullest value for your webinar. If you deliver a webinar and it's a completely standalone and it's lost forever once it's done, that's obviously not as strong to an automated recording off the back of having done that webinar. So you look out for those things for repeated viewing, okay? And then we've also got subtitles coming in there as well. Now, Zoom is excellent for that. Other surfaces do that, okay? But Zoom is an excellent one. You want to know your students are attending, okay? So look for a service that quantifies who did what and when. You see here, even that first column is interesting. Who attended and who didn't. Okay, so here we know that Brenda did not attend, Lyndon did not attend. Okay, so we know that they weren't there, and obviously we've got more join time, leave time. You've got the specific information here. Attentiveness score. Attentiveness relates to were they focused on your app, basically, or were they having it playing in the background? Okay, so this will give you that relation. These are some good numbers. Let's hope your students will get these. Again, this specific example is out of Zoom. Let's go on. Scalable. This is interesting. How many people can you actually broadcast to? So the winner here is Zoom. You can get up to 10,000 people to attend. Now, you're not going to go to that scale, I would assume, but it starts at 100. Okay, so something between 100 and 10,000, or something from between 0 and 10,000 is perfectly achievable here. You've got a slightly smaller scale in some of the other providers, but I mean, you've still got some. I mean, I would say it's unlikely you're going to do a webinar even bigger than 250. I would suggest, but just bear that in mind. But certainly in terms of scalability, it's one of the advantages. You can get your best explainer in the department to deliver the session. You can get others to manage the chat, mark the work, whatever it happens to be. Automatic reminder follow-up emails. I mean, these are really important. We're using an example from Zoom here. If you have a look at this one, we've got email settings. We've got confirmation email to registrants. So as soon as they're registered, they get a confirmation email. They get a reminder email 1 hour and 1 day before the webinar. That's really helpful. You get a follow-up email to attendees sent 1 day after the date, after the event. And anyone who is absent, they get a different email. Now, again, this is really focused on business purposes or training purposes. You know, how useful is this for you using your students? Certainly the reminders, I think, are particularly important. This absentee one could be interesting. And you can, of course, tailor this and edit it to be whatever you want it to be. That becomes interesting because, you could word it however you wanted to word it. And it's automated. You don't have the work to do there. So that integration is important. And finally, app and web-based. We've got a scenario here where you need to consider how people are actually going to access this. Now, you see with Adobe, they're probably the winner here. As is Webinar Ninja, they have got both app and web-based functionality available. Zoom, Webinar Jam don't. Okay, vice versa in each case. Now, something like Zoom, of course, it's a free app for the audience and they can download it onto their device, including their desktop, their tablet, their phone, but it is a download. So you've got to think about the practicalities of that. Webinar Jam is only available web-based. So you go into Chrome, you go into Safari, you go into whatever, and you access that way. So think about the practicalities of that. For me, this wouldn't put me off using Zoom. I just want to make sure my students knew how to do that. Now, we've already looked at the pros and cons of webinars. I won't bore you too much with this, but they're amongst the positives we believe. But there are some downsides, of course, and I want to focus on this. Webinars have limited interaction, although you've got all that functionality in there. The student is ultimately passive on the other end unless you have those interactive features really flying. You've got this notion, it's really about the passiveness of it, but you've got this notion of the students being recipients rather than contributors. You are going to pay for this as a school, let's be blunt, and you need to talk to your senior management about this if you're going to set it up. There is some training that's going to be required, and it's not associated with your VLE, so it's not directly going to integrate with your systems. And really, this is a nice summary. It's a presentational tool only. Does this mean you shouldn't use it? Definitely not. It's a great tool to use, but just be aware of those things. And to finish off with, guys, I mean, I would say that for us, this is our kind of, as it were, tell score. Now, I'm not going to literally count up the stars there. You can have a look yourselves. But Adobe Connect and Zoom come out very, very strongly in this particular environment. We have had some concerning experiences with Zoho Meeting in the last few days because we've been testing all of these out. Webinar Jam, I'd say, is quite a specialized one because it's got those evergreen automated webinars with the recorded material going through them. If you specifically wanted that, look at Webinar Jam, and EverWebinar is the automated function of that. But we reckon Zoom, we reckon Adobe Connect are really seriously worthy of your consideration.
Okay, we've got sound on, Marta yet? Good, we're all good?
Yes, I think we're all good, yes.
Super. Okay, so there we go. I mean, it's I think the good news is that pretty much regardless of which feature set you choose or which service you choose, you're gonna get a good service, really. I mean, these tools are pretty efficient. They're pretty high quality. I do have a leaning. I'm happy to share what my leaning is if people want to know it. But obviously, I'm not affiliated with any of these organisations. But I can give you my opinion if you want me to. So yeah, any questions from you though, Marta?
There's a question from Physics Online who've been watching the session, and
this is Lewis, I assume.
They were asking if you can live stream to YouTube through Zoom in real time.
Yeah, you can. So Zoom, I'm afraid I can't answer necessarily for all the other services, but some of them may do this. Zoom, you can live stream to YouTube Live, and you can live stream to Facebook Live as well. I don't think you can. I don't think you can stream to both of them without a transcoder. That's a more technical conversation. We're using a transcoder now. We're only streaming to YouTube, but theoretically we could stream to YouTube, Facebook simultaneously. Although we're only using a single stream at the moment. But yes, Zoom does do that, and it's particularly good for that. I mean, you can get really technical with these things. I mean, once you're into a Zoom call, obviously what people will tend to do is they'll use their camera on their laptop or their device or their phone as the camera. But like we've got now, if I just show you what we've got as the other camera, which is there. Look, there's my bike in the background.
Hold on. Let me change.
Oh, sorry. Yeah. So there's our other camera. Now, if you switch between, they're now staring at each other. These two cameras. Yep. So you can have a multi-camera setup. Now, we didn't go into that because we didn't really think it was relevant for this particular conversation. So you can produce any, your options for getting live feeds out, multi-camera feeds. You can get super technical if you want to. I just don't think in any range of cases with the impending pressure that may well be coming on in the coming days and weeks that will actually be the case. But those options are there. Zoom, I'm a big fan of, a real big fan of it, Zoom webinars.
I mean, I was just going to say that on a more basic level, you could always do the webinar, it gets recorded, and then put the recording on YouTube straight after. Exactly. So that would be like working on a more basic level, not transcoder, no nothing, just...
Well, that also works really, really well. Keep it nice and simple, and it's automatically posted there. You've got no processing to do. You probably just want to write a description. But other than that, you're probably good to go. So yeah, I mean, I'm happy to give you my leaning if you want much, if that's helpful.
Yes, I don't see why not.
So, I mean, it probably comes through in the presentation there, but I personally think Zoom is the best option. Okay, so that's based on a couple of things. I accept that they are to a degree subjective. One is I have a trusted and confident relationship with that particular service, including using it to deliver material to students and students being the recipients on the end of it. It's a really nice service for that reason. I really like the recording features in Zoom because you can record seamlessly to the cloud. It's stored there. It's also the storage included, and then you can download, process, put to YouTube. You can also live stream, as we've mentioned before, as well. So for me, Zoom is by far the option that I would go for first. Having said that, I'm only vaguely familiar with Adobe Connect, having done the research for this particular show. And I increasingly had the impression that I should look into it more to make a more genuine comparison. So I should say that my personal view is somewhat subjective towards Zoom. I have no relationship. I'm a customer of theirs. But it's a good service, and you won't go far wrong if you use Zoom. It will get the job done for you. It is premium, and you need to talk, if you're not the head teacher or the budget manager in the school, you need to talk to those people pretty soon to secure the finances to get this available to you. Yes, a teacher could pay for it out of their pocket, but why should you? This should be provided for you, and we think that would be a really good use of school funds with what may be about to come. Any other questions, Marta?
No, not so.
Any questions from you?
No, I don't think so. I think it's all very. I don't know. I think it's very clear what you can't. What these webinar services offer you. I think it's good to know that there are plenty of options. There are from more budget options to more high-end, expensive options, and it's just a matter of exploring a little bit and looking at what the best option is for each person and each teacher, really.
And I would say the other thing is that it's quite likely if you use webinar software for any period of time, like a year, 2 years, 3 years, you probably will switch between them. there's a normal journey to go on with that. You'll use one, you'll get familiar, and then you'll find a feature set, another one that you kind of fancy and want to give a go to. That's normal, but obviously with the impending pressure of potential school closures, you're probably feeling a sort of a pressure to get it right first time. So with that in mind, I think the reliability that something like Zoom or Adobe Connect provides, it's hard to turn away from that. If you can get the costing sorted out in the school, then obviously that makes a big difference. So you're not going to go far wrong with those services. They're very, very robust and they work really, really well. So I would go towards Zoom because of the recording functionality. For me, that works particularly well. The analytics are also really, really good. I've used Webinar Jam and EverWebinars a lot, but within business. I mean, I've used EverWebinars because they're what we call evergreen webinars. I've used them as what are called just-in-time webinars. So this is a different conversation. Basically, with webinars, you find this won't be the case with your kids because they'll know, and the students, they'll know they have to show up. But generally speaking, on webinars, good attendance is about 50% of the registrants. So it's one of these things that people sign up to, but only half actually tend to attend. What are called just-in-time webinars, you get a much higher attendance rate because people find it and the webinar's starting in just a few moments' time, so the attendance rate tends to be higher. And of course, from a sort of marketing perspective, that can be really, really effective.
It gives you the impression that, I've just happened to
I just stumbled
upon the webinar and it's just about to start. Oh, wow.
But it's also a bit deceptive. Yeah. So you've got to be a little bit careful. And kids are smart. They're going to cotton on to stuff like that. If they know you're not really there, they're going to know. And they're going to cotton on to that, but it's a functionality that's there. So if it's an interesting one to consider. I really value them, but I'm not sure I'd use it for an educational purpose. I just wonder how many people even knew that stuff existed. Have colleagues who are on this show tonight, have you been on an evergreen webinar, thought it was live, and in fact it was recorded? We are live, by the way.
Yes, we are.
We are live in this case. I mean, I don't know how to prove it. I could have picture of today's newspaper if you want, but we are genuinely live while we're answering questions.
Yeah,
so
that only happens when you get kidnapped, though.
But to have a recorded stream is beneficial because you can quality assure.
Yeah.
You know you're not going to screw it up, or you can have someone check it beforehand. Now again, with impending time limitations, you might not have that luxury. But it's a nice feature that you can record in stream because it guarantees that. Also, what happens, I don't want to say something dark, what happens if someone gets poorly and you can't live stream? Then the recording is quite valuable then, of course. So
exactly, because you could always do a mixture in your webinar. You could always do a mixture of recorded material that, for example,
hybrid webinars,
let's say different there's different teachers teaching the same subject. One teacher records all the lessons for X group, another teacher records for, and then there's a combination of live Q&A and recorded material, of course, during that time, because of course we've got to remember that we in this case where schools are closed, you've got you're trying to get on with teaching, but also of course you'll be setting work, having to mark. So of course you can also try and use that time wisely. So if it might not be necessary for every single teacher to be explaining the same things at the same time. So
without meaning to be controversial, I would go in a very specific direction with this. If you're a department of say 5 teachers, or 4 or 8, it doesn't matter, but if you want the person delivering the webinar or doing the delivery teaching bit, you want them to be the best in the department at doing that thing. Other members of the department can then do what they're specialised in, maybe engagement, maybe managing the chat, maybe managing work as it's submitted, maybe setting tasks on the learning management system that you're using. This for me makes far, far, far more sense. Get people doing what they're good at more. Of course, classrooms require teachers to be absolute all-rounders by definition, but maybe that's one of the small advantages here, is that we can become specialised a little bit in the things that we're stronger at. So that's just a bit of a provocative thought. Yeah. But I want to summarise again, and I don't know if you can put the infographic up once more, Marta. I want to summarise again that our advice to schools and to teachers who are preparing themselves for school closures, will they happen? We don't know. We're just here just in case. But our advice to you is that you should be using a combination of 2 things. The relevant and right learning management system. So a content-rich learning management system is your first priority when it comes to remote learning. The second priority is this live teaching webinar type environment, which we talked about today, or some of the options you got today. That is the combination that you should be implementing, in our opinion. So we strongly advocate that to you. Download the infographic, have a good look at it, see what we've put into there. We're back on Monday where we're looking at the specific feature set of Zoom, and I'm literally going to show you how to set up a webinar, how to get it working, how to run it, what pitfalls you might have, and we'll talk you through that. It'll be about half an hour, a bit like today, and we'll get the job done for you. So that is Monday next week.
Yep.
We've got an interesting weekend coming up. Before we go, I hope this doesn't come across as unprofessional, but I do want to say, if Marta can put her camera back on a second, I do want to say that it's Marta's 40th birthday tomorrow. So Marta turns 40.
I'm saying goodbye to my 30s.
Midnight tonight. So I just want to wish Marta a really happy birthday.
Thank
you. We're going to do some nice things. We've got some stuff sorted out, and hopefully it'll be a memorable weekend.
Yeah, and hopefully try not to get ill in the process as well.
Well, there is, there is that as well. I mean, I don't know.
Actually, sorry, the camera was not showing me because I was. It's okay. Hold on a second.
Okay.
Now.
There you go.
Hello.
Happy birthday.
Thank you.
No,
I was just showing. I was displaying the series of the sessions that are to come. So as you said, there's one on Monday at 7:00, and then the next one is next Friday, so a week today at 4:00.
Exactly.
And it's also important to remind people. I think a few things that you can do. Of course, you can subscribe to our YouTube channel and support us in our endeavors. Also, we are available on training for broadcasting, and if you're interested in any of those aspects, please send us an email on broadcastyourself@EverLearner.com. And of course, if there are forced closures, you can get in touch at the same email address.
Perfect. Look, let's sign off there. It's the end of the week. I think everyone could do with going home and having a bit of normality, because this is mad what's going on, and let's just keep our fingers crossed that everyone's going to be okay, that you guys are going to be okay. Let's just keep our fingers crossed that this passes as lightly as it can, and obviously we'll do whatever we can from our end to support and help people. I think that's the best that we can do.
Definitely.
And just wish everyone well. Look after loved ones. Look after those who lean towards being more vulnerable. And we're here to do what we can in the educational aspect to support as much as we humanly can. So we guarantee we'll try and do that, and we'll see how things develop.
Mm-hmm. Right. So have a great weekend.
Happy birthday. Have a great weekend, everyone.
Bye.
Take care.
Bye-bye.